The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, TechBytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
We are at NRF 26. We are in the Foodservice Innovation Zone, and the IFBTA, the concept partner, has been here at something called the Pit Stop. But you always run into people, this one is purely intentional. And I have Vikram Badhwar, who is with Starbucks, but he's actually on our board.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
And you're not bored on being on our board. You're on our board because it's always exciting, right? Technology.
I'm not bored with being on the IFBTA board. Technology is exciting, and you've got some great people on the board, and it's great to sort of help the community, and I love what the IFBTA do. So
Vic and I were talking about this, and while we've sat on panels together, we've never actually done the podcast together, yet we have tons of conversations about technology and different things that are on, and we've known each other for a while. And by the way, I was told I would not be rude today if I had this sitting here, because normally I would never have a drink on here, but today,
nice.
You could serve it to me.
Nice bit of product placement. Right? I love it. Yeah.
There we go. We'll just put it right there, right? So, listen, we've known each other a long time, and people who don't know you, I mean, your background really, I think we first met when you were at McDonald's.
Yeah. So I'll do a bit of an intro, right? So I work for Starbucks International, based out of the London office. And my team are responsible for retail, orchestration, and our data platforms in international. So we've scaled our Starbucks technology into around 5,500 stores. That will scale to 7,000 stores this year. So that's right the way from POS to orchestration for rewards and MOP and delivery, and then app, like the app ecosystem as well. So
we call this digital or what?
Yeah, so it's called Starbucks Digital Solutions is the internal name for effectively what we're doing. And so we're building a tech stack to provide our international licensees.
So first of all, you got to love the fact that he just said they orchestrate. And I can only imagine all of the different technologies that come together really in any company.
Yeah.
And, you were at McDonald's, you were at Nando's, you were at KFC. You have a hard time holding a job, I think, is what I'm hearing, right?
Well, that's over the course of 15 years, right?
Oh, okay. So, then we're all right.
Yeah. So, no, but I think over that, over those 15 years, I also worked for Microsoft too.
Oh, I completely forget that, right?
I think it's great to see how technology enables businesses at that scale. Right. And I think that's the bit that I really get excited about in this job. I think, generally speaking, the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry has been a bit of a laggard with technology. McDonald's kind of changed the game with a lot of what they're doing. And,
they did.
Now
some of the first offer online in the stores, and then they had the kiosks that were out there.
And a McDonald's kitchen is ultimately like a factory, the way it can scale up and scale down and how it's tech enabled.
I was amazed by that, because it was like 175 different applications or something like that working, and yet their menu and their drive-through was always known as some of the fastest, and but yet the menu was broad. And so how do you get that speed, and how do you have all those menu items that are in there? And by the way, you had an opportunity. You're working with Starbucks, who really reinvented the customer experience of online ordering.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that plays into your past experience to your present.
Yeah, look, it's with McDonald's, right? Like moving to a just-in-time kind of production model, which enabled customization and everything else, improved product quality, but then still being able to serve product at that speed accurately. It's incredible, right? And so if you ever peek in the back of a McDonald's into the kitchen, you'll see there's quite a few screens in there. But
just quite a few.
But it really is a machine, right? Talking about Starbucks, mobile order and pay actually was born out of our Korean market initially, and then came into North America, and is obviously huge here in the US. You see here at the conference,
you recently got to meet the guy who actually invented that, right?
I met the guy from Shingazi, our licensee in Korea.
Is he famous, within the company for this?
It's famous to me at least. No, but internally, he's the guy that built our MOP application in South Korea. We're doing some trials with self-order kiosks in Korea and Japan, and we've got a test that's running in the UK. So we are increasingly now trying to figure out what is next for digital within our environment.
If you think about it, a lot of times people always thought technology came out of North America. Now, I've always thought differently about that. I've thought hardware from one place, software from another. But if you think about it, even in the McDonald's world, if I remember correctly, the online ordering delivery came out of India, and then you have different things like that. So you travel a lot. You have a title of international in there, and you are here at NRF. So that we can unpack a lot of stuff here. So first of all, if we start with NRF.
Yeah.
So you've been here for 3 days. We didn't force you to come here, so we didn't buy him the plane ticket. So he obviously has a business reason to be here.
Yeah.
So what have you seen here? First of all, is Starbucks a retailer or are they a food service operator?
We say we're in the business of retail.
Right.
I think that's really interesting, right? Because we do, ultimately we make handcrafted beverages to order, right? And we are in the game of like connecting with our customers. And Starbucks should feel like a special experience every time you come into
business.
Yeah, I personally think we are in the hospitality industry, like we are in the hospitality business. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I think about the work that we do. We're not a typical retailer, because we are making product to order.
Right. And some parts of the world, you also have, fresh made food products, and you've done things with sous vide cooking. So there's all kinds of things that are out there. But I think that's a good point. So you're here at NRF. So when you come to a show like NRF, which people would call retail food, meaning C-store and grocery, what is it that you come here to see?
Yeah, look, I think the scale of NRF, for those that haven't been here, is very incredibly impressive, right? And what you guys have done with the pit stop, for those that don't know, like bringing together multiple technologies. There's a little kind of go-kart track here with voice AI, and they've got conveyance for drive-through orders and like ordering kiosks, like pulling it all together like a best-of-breed ecosystem, I think is like great you've been able to pull it off like for the show and actually demonstrate it.
And we probably left, if there are 10 technologies in here or 10 suppliers, I can tell you right now, there's another 10 we could have done that we didn't because labor, scheduling, loyalty. I mean, there are so many pieces now. And by the way, walking this show gives new inspiration for what do you do next, right?
Yeah.
What else can come into this?
Yeah. And the reason I mention that is like ultimately APIs and, these solutions now are increasingly becoming like plug and play and interoperable. And so figuring out what that best-in-class ecosystem is for your brand is really important, right? And that's why I come to shows like this, is just to stay on top of what is happening in the industry, what can we learn from more broader retail as well. It's also a great way to connect with the suppliers that we work with, so get some face-to-face time with them and their kind of leadership teams, but also meet new vendors as well.
Well, I'm not so sure that people actually realize in our industry the number of connected things that they could do. So if we really boil it down, I mean, the next step, if I were, forget about the additional 10 technologies, right? But let's talk about what else could have been here, right? Mm-hmm. So connected kitchen, smart equipment. They're certainly doing something with the vision and video, AI, but what you can do with the existing feeds and cameras. And I don't know if you guys are working. It doesn't have to be about Starbucks. It's, your peers and people you see out there that are doing innovative things, right?
I think computer vision applications in production use cases, front of house use cases, drive-through optimization are incredibly interesting. I think now the technology has got to a point where it's very cost effective. It can scale. It is scaling. We've done some like tests with some of that. I think like for me, I think where it gets super interesting is really trying to understand nuance around particular stores, like in stores at peak, what is happening? Are we staffing up quick enough? Are customers walking the queue? As we put new things into environments, what is that doing for kind of customer flow, transactions? And I think actually using vision to get some of the insight rather than just looking at transactional data, which doesn't always tell you the story, is very useful.
How does it relate when you're taking a look at culture being people's culture in different parts around the world? I mean, is it possible to have the same platform everywhere? And then in today's world, you're talking about the APIs, is it possible to not only scale, but also customize, personalize, I think would be the word I'd rather use here.
Yeah.
Personalize the experience based upon the culture and the place where you want to be.
Yeah, I think it is possible. There are some of the large QSRs have scaled consistent tech around the world, right? It's not easy. And like on occasion, you have to ask, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? And so I think like what Yum's doing with Yum Bites, what McDonald's have done with their technology stack, their global mobile app and global mobile app Lite, I think has ultimately demonstrated that you can scale consistent tech. And then, effectively, if you can have 70% consistent and 30% that's localizable, I think you can get to a space where you can truly scale.
70-30, so 30 localization. And what we're not talking about, to be very clear about this, what we're not talking about is when people start dealing with regional menus and things. We're talking about localization of how people use the systems, how they interact, right?
Look and feel, potential integrations that we might not have, especially like in the payment space in Asia, for example, there are so many wallets that you need to integrate with. You have obviously WeChat and Alipay, and so
payments is
it's
a
totally,
whole other thing, right?
Like payments, rewards, like other partnerships, like will potentially vary by market. UI, UX might need to flex as well a little bit, but you could have kind of common back end serving all of it, and then you can get some real efficiencies.
Well, let's just take a quick break here, and then we'll continue on because I'd like to just explore some of the new technologies and some of the nuances, perhaps, of the, this is an international show. So I'm with Vik Badhwar, who is working with international technologies with Starbucks, but a lot of experience in many different. We'll come right back after this break.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
So welcome back. And I'm really pleased to be having a conversation on air because I've had this conversation before over coffee before, but this is mine. We're not sharing the cup. So I've had this conversation before of different types of things that are going on in technology with Vik Badhwar, the director of international technology at Starbucks, out of the UK, but he travels a lot. So he's probably at, what's your favorite airline?
I'm based out of the UK. Heathrow's my local airport. So I use British Airways a lot just because it's the home air.
We're not going to be seated next to each other because they're not on the right alliance for me. So that's not going to happen. But so we were just sort of talking about some of the observations and things that are out there. And you've really teed up a whole bunch of different conversation points. If you think about it, you brought up APIs and you talked about how many different technologies there are that might be in a single place, in a single unit, right? And they're coming up all the time. Are you finding that it's, I remember the old days when you could not find global technologies. And is it easier today because there are global platforms? And then as you deal with payments, which you already brought up, or you do localization of loyalty or whatever it's going to be, is it easier to plug and play today internationally where you're not worrying about fiscal printing and you're not worried about this, that, and the other thing?
We are worrying about fiscal printing and things like that in the international markets. I think there are. It's an interesting question because there aren't many truly tech players in our industry that can scale to all the places that Starbucks are or the McDonald's are, right? And that's why some brands have made the decision to sort of build their own technology from the bottom up, right? We do have a point of sale vendor in Oracle that has been able to scale with us in the bulk of the markets that we operate in effectively. And that's enabled us to then, the ecosystem that we've built is a mixture of large and small players, right? And so you bring the big players in that effectively can get you to scale, can have on the ground, like boots on the ground support in the markets we need to operate in. But then you can provide agility and kind of innovation around the edges by plugging in like some more smaller agile players, right? And that's how like the ecosystem that we've built out in Starbucks Digital Solutions effectively operates and how we think about it. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
that's always why I took a look at separating out hardware, software, and services.
Yeah,
I actually lead with software because that's what everything's going on. Hardware, you can get, even you guys are using hardware that may not be produced by the people you do your software. So you can do that. And then services are really localized because you need people who are going to be able to react and do things in the market.
Yeah, exactly. So we think about, create a specification for the hardware that you need, but allow the markets to source locally. to make that simpler. You obviously need localized support. You need to be able to get the hardware physically in that market, which is not always available. So we do support our technology running on different hardware footprints. And I think realistically, that's the only way you can truly scale. There is an argument on the flip side of that, though, around, if you truly leverage the scale of a system, with 40,000 units or 30,000 units,
right.
Like you have so much leverage there over like hardware purchasing. But that's not always easy to realize in a complex kind of franchised environment.
It's not always easy to realize also when you have different geopolitical things going on that may impact the sourcing of the hardware either, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you really do have to have a flex. You know what? If there ever was a need to have a flexible, tech stack of hardware, that's the reason that you need to do it, because you just don't know, right?
Yeah,
where it's going to be. And it seems so easy for people to pop up with new software. I'm not exactly sure why people ever really, even with your scale, would develop their own software today, because it seems like it's the parts and pieces that come together in it. And by the way, I've become a software developer now in the last 6 months because I learned this thing called AI and ChatGPT and Claude. And all of a sudden, I'm programming stuff that I never thought that I could write.
Yeah.
I don't write code, but boy, I make it work, right?
Yeah, it's such an interesting time, right? Like now, effectively, you don't need to be like a capable, like trained software developer to build applications, right? I think for me, the argument of build v buy is super interesting. I think at a certain scale for, ultimately where there is intellectual property, if you're doing something within your brand that is truly differentiated and there isn't a piece of technology on the market that supports what you need, I do think there is justification to build, your own tech. Like in a McDonald's environment, the way that production management works, forecasting what you need to produce from a batch cooking perspective, how that's served up to the crew members in the store, that is something that is relatively unique to McDonald's.
It's part of the process, but you know what? If you think about unique, and never's a long time, right? You think about the pizza guys, who had to create their own because they were very unique. And then they had their routing systems and their mapping systems and things like that. Today, would you call that unique? I wonder actually if they started all over today.
Yeah.
Would they in fact go build their own systems for that, knowing that pizza is a little bit complex with all the well, you know what? I don't know how many combinations there are in the secret menu at Starbucks, but there's a lot of combinations, and you don't really think that. But pizza has a lot of combinations, stuff to do.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, right? I think obviously when they started that journey, there was nothing on the market. You had to build something. Now there is so much, right? It feels like POS providers, like best tech providers in serving the industry. There are new players popping up all the time. Right?
Yeah,
so I think that is really interesting. I do think for certain use cases, having something, if you need to assess whether the problem you're trying to solve, can it be solved by commodity solutions that are on the market, or is there truly justification for doing something unique that is adding business value and justifies building it yourself, right? And so we have like elements of that.
Or it's give and take.
Yeah, so like right? Consumer-facing digital in most of the brands I've worked in, we've wanted to wholly own that experience and have something that's unique to the brand, right? And so you own the UI, UX. In a lot of cases, you own the source code for the application.
Well, wait a minute. So that particular thing has also come up as people talk about owning loyalty and owning, companies are now thinking about who owns that data, for instance, that's used when people are doing comments or when people are doing things there. Okay. And there's this whole thing about who's hosting, who's owning what. And of course, with AI that's out there, who's owning content. Yeah. So I think that's probably something that's going to go back and forth for a while. As what they want. But I would also say that personally, I find it a challenge, and I found it a challenge working with the pit stop here at NRF to let somebody tell me you cannot find something off the shelf that's going to work with it. And I'll go find it. Now, it may not be in the same industry, which is why I think it's interesting to be doing a food service thing here at NRF. But I believe that somewhere, healthcare or anybody that does hospitality and people, right? That you may find the technology you want, and then you have to bring it into your industry.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? I think like there's a lot of none of this is really rocket science. And to your point, many of these problems have been solved either within the industry or in other industry verticals and could be applicable, right, to the industry. I think for us, in my mind, I try to, from an international perspective, we don't have a lot of capacity to build solutions. And in a licensed model, we want to go to best of breed vendors that can directly engage with our licensees and effectively deploy
and maybe
the technology.
You do best of breed and you bring them on a all-in-one platform.
Yeah.
Which is actually sort of a hybrid approach, not making the choice of best of breed versus all-in-one.
Yeah. And the other thing that we do is just because you're buying something doesn't mean you can't have a truly differentiated solution off the back of it, right? There's a level of with Oracle and Symphony, we take Symphony and then we have a extension library on top of it with a lot of extensibility. So we have custom screens, custom integrations. So when I talk about that 70-30, that 30% is the kind of secret sauce that makes the implementation unique to us. Right?
Absolutely.
And that could be true for any solution.
It is. And that's why you build on it, but then you have to bring your culture, the way you do business in there, and what makes you, and your differentiation points, which have to do with service as much as it has to do with food or how many drinks or handcrafted drinks. They're all differentiation points in how you interact with the customer and their loyalty piece. Mm-hmm. So, I was really sort of hoping that AI was not going to be the major subject this year here, but they had a whole conference on it here. They also had a reverse logistics conference, a reverse logistics.
Yeah, it was very interesting, yeah.
Oh, you went to it. Okay.
Yeah,
so I found that fascinating because you don't think about all the returns and stuff, but as a retailer, you might think of it on food, maybe reverse logistics doesn't matter, but but anyway, well, it does, but it's a whole different thing. But I find that, really fascinating, but I also think that we've moved. And so the AI conversations that I saw here were, the agentic, and I saw more of people saying, let us just give you the tool, you create the bot, you create, your application or what it is you're doing. Do you think they're really there that the everyday person, this is a conference where all the enterprise people are, right?
Yeah.
Can a small to medium business now use these tools to compete? And are they really good enough that it's easy enough to understand and do it?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of promise around AI. And, I have seen some really interesting agentic AI use cases across the different big tech booths that are here at NRF. And there are a number of operators, especially in the retail space, that are using AI to streamline workflows, process, content creation at scale. Right? So I do think the technology, it's constantly...
I'm watching a robot here waiting for him to hit our camera.
Yeah.
But somehow he missed it.
Yeah,
so,
it's funny that we're talking about AI and this little robot's wandering around. So I do think the technology is there and it's continuing to improve and become more scalable. I do think though, assessing what are the areas that you're really going to go after to leverage AI and drive productivity. I think every organization needs to do, and then invest where it makes sense. And effectively don't believe all of the hype.
But you know what the interesting thing is? That people would always say, actually I would say this because, I tell people I'm a restaurant manager first, technology person second. Mm-hmm. And I would tell people all the time, if you're going to talk to me, we're not going to go ahead and do technology for technology's sake, right? Exactly. However, I wonder if that process or that thinking changes with AI, because I'm starting to think it's got to be almost like AI first. That if I got a question or I want to do something, half the time I'm already into it for hours, and then it hits me, oh, why don't I just check and see if I can do this? And I get surprised. I say, wow, I could sort of do that, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe we are headed for, AI first thinking or something.
Yeah, 100%. I think the main thing, right, is, and I think the job of the technologists within kind of modern organizations is to, I think there's a role to educate everybody on what the art of the possible is, right? So, AI literacy within organizations is incredibly important. AI projects shouldn't be owned and just solely driven by tech. The business needs to pull on it, but the business also needs to be, educated and aware of what is actually technically possible, right? And things have moved monumentally within the last 12 months alone.
So what is the challenge of I guess there's two parts. You have a lot of stores, you have a lot of countries. Okay, so the educational level in different places. Now, we might just take a generic approach and say that young people understand this really well, and you have a lot of younger workers. Okay, great, but you have older ones too. But how do you break that down between leadership understanding the possibility and investing in it, but also having the people that actually work the line, including hourly employees and part-time employees, understanding how it can help them in their jobs to be more efficient in what they're doing without losing the personalization with the customer?
Yeah, I think you just have to be very selective about the use cases you go after, right? So publicly, Starbucks has talked about Green Dot Assist, which is a large language model prompt in stores where store partners can ask the LLM model information about how to clean the Mastrena coffee machine, or effectively pull on other SOPs dynamically. And I think that use case that helps store partners go to one place, get the information they need in a timely way, is really useful, right? And that is like a really good use case of practical AI implementation that is driving value for store partners at the coalface. At the enterprise level, I think where there's so much opportunity is really in the kind of supply chain space, forecasting demand.
Well, you guys are big in the supply chain space, and more so than many people, right?
I think that's where we've got so much opportunity. How do we optimize what we're ordering, what we're holding in stores, really optimize supply chain?
Just-in-time inventory.
Just-in-time inventory. I think that's where there's a ton of opportunity at an enterprise level, and where organizations should really be focusing today. Because that's where you're going to get material dollars back ultimately.
Right.
Also in the labor space, naturally, right? Forecasting demand, who needs to go where, getting really smart with scheduling. And there are a number of providers here actually now that are doing some interesting stuff in the scheduling space.
Well, there certainly is, and labor continues to be a big issue. Labor training, anything labor training, not just because of cost actually, but for customer service. Yeah, I don't look at it. I do look at it as a cost thing, of course. But for customer service and thinking ahead as to what you can do, I look at it as more of a positive benefit than, we're going to go save labor, because actually I see us, including Starbucks, going into new innovative spaces that you may not have thought of, expanding that way, right? Not traditional.
Yeah, 100%, right? I think I think that's the right way to see it. It's additive, right? So, and if we become more productive, that's great. But the reality is, all organizations are on this journey, right? So it's you're not sort of doing this alone. So and so for me, I think the practical use cases around you mentioned personalization, leveraging AI to hyper personalize an experience, make you feel special in that experience and seen, is where I think there's a ton of value for us to get after, frankly. Right.
Well, there is. And there's a lot to brew on here. So I don't know. I was trying to find something that we could talk about here. So listen, I'm sure there's a lot of conversation points and a lot of touch points that we have, and this conversation will continue. We'll figure out a way to include our audience on this as well. But Vic, I want to thank you for coming on the TechBytes podcast, and also for serving with the IFBTA and supporting and helping us to have a vision of what we might do here and other parts of the world as well. So
thank you, Rob.
Thanks for joining.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFBTA is the industry's voice of food service, hospitality, and retail technology, providing thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share in conversations like the one we're having today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of TechBytes, powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.